The south of France is a popular vacation spot, and it's easy to see why. The Mediterranean sun, gorgeous cities, and a totally unique culture separate it from the north. But there's a whole world hidden under these popular tourist spots, one that goes unnoticed by many of the visitors to the area. And no, I'm not talking about Romans and Greeks, or even Gauls. So this is the entrance to the Lazaret Cave in Nice, France. Now this site is probably the oldest site I've ever been in, because this is not my usual old. This isn't early Bronze Age or Stone Age. No, this is Ice Age. Because the people who lived here are so old that they weren't even Homo sapiens, but Neanderthals. This cave was inhabited up to 120,000 years ago. Hi everyone, this is Travels with an Archaeologist. I'm the Archaeologist, now let's get into the travels. So today, I'm looking at our ancestors who lived in the caves of southern France. That's right, today I'm talking about literal cavemen. And for this, I went away from the Mediterranean beaches and quaint cafes up into dank mountain caves, which, trust me guys, is the perfect thing to do on your romantic getaway. She was so excited when I said the south of France, she had no idea. So you've probably heard about the caves at Lascaux. These are actually older. It's easy to blob together all cave people as one big chunk of history, but let's put this in a bit of perspective. 20,000 years separates us from Lascaux, but more than 100,000 separates Lascaux from Lazaret, 5 times longer. And the Lazaret caves are particularly fun because you can actually enter them. Many of these caves you can't enter because they're too delicate, but you can go into these ones because there isn't much in here that can be easily damaged, unlike other prehistoric caves. So I don't expect to see art or cave drawings in here. That tends to be associated only with Homo sapiens, not with Neanderthals. It's a bit of a mistake in our academics of why I think that, but this isn't really the time to get into it. But in any case, we can still find evidence of humans in here, all along the cave walls. For example, the occupation layers from the excavation. 29 layers spanning nearly 70,000 years, to be precise. So to return to our sense of perspective, 3 times as much time has passed between the first and last use of this cave than has passed between us and Lascaux. In this cave, we find choppers, hand axes, and signs of animal butchery. This was done not only by Neanderthals, which you'll probably know from pop culture as these guys with the big eyebrows, but also a second species of human called Homo heidelbergensis, who was slightly older and is believed to be a Neanderthal ancestor. Again, there's a lot of debate on this. Human evolution is a very thorny issue, and one I'm not getting into today, but I probably will wade into this minefield in the future, so like and subscribe to stay updated on that. Human activity here was recurring throughout the Paleolithic, associated with the Acheulean and the Mousterian periods. Or, for those of you not familiar with such terms, the period of these axes, and one period later where they got a slight upgrade. Neanderthals would drag their hunt in here to process and eat, and they also would have died here. It's likely that they set up tents that degraded in later millennia and made a proper home out of this place. But it's important to put this lifestyle into context. These people were nomadic, and if you traveled here 120,000 years ago, you'd more than likely find it empty. Now, as fun as these caves are and as old as they are, it's a mistake to think that anybody actually lived here. I mean, they lived here, and 28 human remains have been found here, but they didn't actually live here in the sense that we live in a house or a farm. These people were nomads, so this cave, although it was inhabited for 70,000 years, it was probably only for a few days or weeks at a time. A lot of studies have been done on hearths especially, and they show that fires here burned for days at a time, suggesting that when people did come here, they, like us, wanted light and heat in a dark room. One study even suggested that Homo heidelbergensis could hibernate in caves like this, however the evidence they cited could also just be consistent with food shortages in winter months and a diet of red meat during this time. Either way, people needed shelter. So in the depths of winter, people took to caves exactly like this one, where you could find them living around a fire trying to survive the Ice Age winter. It's important to note that our ancestors were still smart and thinking about things. Yes, they were cavemen, but they were not stupid. Even if we don't see art, we do still see a conscious and intelligent use of space. The hearths were placed in a part of the cave that not only allowed them to maximize space around it for everyday life, and the radiance of the heat, but also to minimize their exposure to smoke inhalation. That's right, our caveman ancestors were actually concerned with fire safety and understood how to minimize the risks, and yet you still insist on lighting candles near your curtains. So what we get is a picture of a group of people who were thoughtful and capable of planning just so far behind us technologically. They'd come here to find shelter, warm themselves, recover, and then leave again for, well, who knows how long. Did they visit this cave annually or generationally? And more importantly, why was it suddenly abandoned such that Homo sapiens never once used it? Well, firstly, let's remember that this wasn't exactly sudden. 70,000 years is a long, long time. This cave was inhabited for longer than quite literally every single city on the globe. But the fact is, humans didn't so much abandon Lazaret so much as geological forces made the cave inaccessible. Lazaret Cave was closed off by nature before our more direct Homo sapiens ancestors ever even got there. It was only rediscovered in the 20th century. Homo sapiens had to find somewhere else to stay when they got to this region. But the landscape of southern France offers plenty more caves and shelters for Homo sapiens, which brings us to the Cosquer Cave just outside of Marseille. Unlike the Lazaret Cave in Nice, you can't actually enter it. And you know what? I approve of this. Too many visitors can and will damage the cave art, even unintentionally, and for the sake of preserving it, we need to keep it empty. Now, the interesting parts of the cave have been recreated in the museum in Marseille, if you want to see it, but here they don't allow you to take pictures. And that I am a little confused by, because I mean, it's just a recreation. What are you afraid of? Anyway, I do recommend the tour of them if you are in the area. It just sucks that I can't show you my photos because I wasn't allowed to take them, and I have to borrow from their website. This cave was discovered by Henri Cosquer in 1985, and perhaps only 20% of the original cave survives, the rest being flooded. But they are totally unique in the archaeological world, both for what they depict and what they show us about our ancestors. The surviving cave art can only be seen by swimming up a 116-meter-long passage, but what survives is incredible. It also gives us a more nuanced picture of life in the Paleolithic, that is, the early Stone Age. In addition to stone flakes from tool making, burn marks from hearths and torches, and charred remains, there are also hints of using this place for ritual and ceremony, especially decoration. For example, finger marks line the whole cave, showing people were taking material from the roof for some reason, possibly for the walls, possibly for face paint, and possibly for some other reason. The first phase of occupation here is from 33,000 years ago, in what was known as the Gravettian. These earliest Gravettian Homo sapiens left behind imprints of themselves, quite literally. These hand shadows are the earliest marks they left behind, lining the cave walls with at least 65 currently recorded. Now, when archaeologists first saw these hands with missing fingers, they found it really weird that so many of our ancestors were missing fingers. I mean, it was a harsh and painful life for them, sure, but to lose fingers every hunt, that just didn't make any sense. But then we sobered up, we remembered we were dealing with humans and that the fingers were probably just folded down because, you know, Occam's razor and all that. So take a minute to put yourself in their shoes. You are a hunter-gatherer living before the era of paper and pen, before writing, before any kind of symbology. Your life is built around finding food and shelter, and you leave these marks on the cave. What are you trying to say? What message are you giving to those who will enter the cave after you, be it your grandchildren or yourself a few years from now? Now take into account that some of these are scratched out and one of them quite violently. What was this trying to say? Was this some sort of exiled individual, perhaps? Or is it just that whatever information it was conveying was no longer true or misleading? You can speculate endlessly, and part of the fun of archaeology this old is kind of the speculation. And as long as you're human, your interpretation is just as good as mine. And if this is a frustrating answer, believe me, I get it. As badly as you want a real answer, I want it worse. But we don't have one. And to suggest that we do is irresponsible. At any rate, people kept coming to these caves, and they returned in what was known as the Solutrean phase 21,000 to 19,000 years ago. This 12,000-year gap between art may not mean much. Remember, 80% of this cave is flooded. It's possible that humans were just using one of these sections in the intervening millennia. Not to mention they were nomadic and their habitation was sparse and irregular. Also, when we talk about evidence this old and this early, a lot is bound to be lost, uncertain, and given in broad strokes. 12,000 years missing from the Paleolithic doesn't quite mean the same thing as 200 missing from the medieval period, you know? But by this point, we see humans drawing animals, and here we see a full display of early creativity. We can tell that 3 of these paintings were made by the same individual, and another one who drew an aurochs using just 2 lines.
They did it a bit like this. Clearly they've had more experience at it than I have.
Like the hands, some of these animals are scratched out, and some have spears in them. One author I found noted that these spears seem to be drawn in major organs, such as the heart and lungs. But to me, this one feels like a bit of a stretch because cave drawings are rather simplistic. Theoretically, really any kind of line you draw in them would be pointing to a major organ in a torso like that. At any rate, some depictions just don't. Some paintings are just geometric shapes with no clear meaning. Oh, and yes, of course, there's also a few genitalia drawn on the walls. Humans have always been human. They explored deep into these caves, ever exploring new passages, and hardly any of the surviving ones remain untouched by humans. And they drew what they saw. In addition to the typical depictions of snow antelope, dogs, aurochs, deer, horses, ibex, and steppe bison, the people here also drew penguins. Cosquer is one of the few caves in the world to depict penguins, or great auks, which went extinct in the 19th century. It is also the only cave in the world known to depict seals, at least 9 of them to be precise. One painting has seals chasing deer in a circle in a representation that, again, we don't fully understand. My initial instinct says it has something to do with the seasons, but again, it's a pure guess on my part. And although today this cave is flooded, back then there was probably a significant amount of dry land leading to the entrance.
Of course, in the Ice Age, things were much different. The coast wasn't here like it is today. It was a few hundred meters further that way.
This is actually what Europe looked like about 20,000 years ago. As you can see, it has a much different coast and shape. Back then, this cave entrance was 40 meters above sea level. Great auks and seals were clearly a part of whatever it was these people wanted to depict also, and these are coastal animals. Seashells have been found among the archaeological remains. But what you saw would have resembled today's North Atlantic, think Scotland or Labrador, not the modern Mediterranean. And all of this would have been above water. But as the glaciers melted, the sea levels rose and cut off the entrance to this cave, along with erasing any evidence of what coastal life here did look like. Today, the cave can only be accessed by skilled divers and floods periodically, leaving the cave art in danger. But one of the fun ways I like to think about these people is to wonder exactly what messages these people were trying to convey through their art, because there was a purpose behind it. Yes, humans are inherently creative creatures, but we're also communicators, and with these animal depictions and hand shadows, what messages were we trying to send? Were these threats or warnings? A map? A history of your time there, or a mark that you were here? Were you bragging about your hunt, letting others know what to expect or that this cave is safe? Was it a place of ceremony and ritual? Was it a record of the seasons? Or was it just a way to pass time while the Ice Age winters forced us inside? It could be all of these things and none of them. So what do you think? Why would you leave these marks, and how would you read them if all you knew was this world? Writing would not be invented for about another 14,000 years after this cave was abandoned, long after their lifestyle and their world was forgotten. We spent the vast majority of our time as a species in these caves, a time that we should not have any memory of. And yet, we do. We still left messages for future generations long after everything else had gone. We were once primitive, but we were never stupid. These were our original homes, where we took our first steps, and where we developed our first languages. And what we were doing made sense to us, in the world as we knew it. They are marks of a world just as intriguing as any later civilization, and a great deal more mysterious. That's all I have to say on France's caves for today, but there's room to do more like this in the future. I also want to say thank you to everyone. I finally hit 2,000 subscribers. And I promise I will do something special when I hit the 5,000 mark. I don't really know what that is yet, but, we do have a bit of time, so leave things you'd like to see this channel do in the comments below. Until next time, I'm the Archaeologist, and this has been The Travels.